Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, July 14th, 2016. This is just bizarre. I mean, it's out there. And I'm trying not to do the conspiracy thing on this because I'm just trying to throw the facts out there. But Secretary Kerry is in Moscow. He's meeting with President Putin. This trip appears, from what I'm hearing, and I'm going to play the clips, wasn't backed by the White House. Am I mistaken, or did something change with the role of Secretary of State? The Secretary of State, by definition, represents the White House, but there you see Kerry and Victoria Nuland speaking with Vladimir Putin. And from what I understand, this is not sanctioned by the White House. Take a listen to the clip.
But on Syria and on Russia and on this proposal that's being brought, it's been clear for several years now, or at least more than 18 months, that the U.S. position has steadily, slowly, but steadily evolved, shifted, coming more in line with the Russian position, which has remained consistent since the very beginning of this conflict. And I'm just wondering why, if the kind of proposal that's being presented, or that has been presented, is being presented now, why couldn't it have been presented far earlier in this process, at least after December, when the Secretary went to Moscow and essentially aligned the U.S. position with that of the Russians vis-a-vis Assad? Is it wrong to think that had this proposal been made earlier, a lot of lives could have been saved?
I would dispute the view that our position has moved. Our position has been consistent, which is Assad must go, that there must be space to have discussions to create that area for a political transition to move. We have long said that we would welcome, Russia's increased focus on ISIL, on Al-Qaeda in Syria. Our common view is that these groups pose a threat to not only the people of Syria, but to both our nations. On your question on timing, again, I'm not going to get ahead of discussions that may be happening in Moscow.
You say that your position has been consistent, but it hasn't. First it was Assad must go, and he must go immediately. Then it was, well, maybe he can hang on for a little bit, but in the end, he still has to go. But that it's got to be up to the Syrian people to...
Well, it's always got to be up to the Syrian people.
Yeah,
that
but
hasn't
your position
changed.
on Assad definitely did change in terms of the timing of when he has to go. And now it appears to have changed to the point where you are prepared to accept or agree to joint operations with the Russians, something that they proposed well over, a month or two ago. So it may not, on that score, it may not have changed just yet because it hasn't been agreed to, but you are now open to things that you weren't open to just several months ago on the military front. And I guess I don't understand why it's wrong for people who are critics of the policy, whatever it is, to point out that if you really think that this is going to salvage the ceasefire and lead to transition talks, or think it has a chance to, why didn't you do it earlier? I mean,
Okay.
a lot of thousands of people have died in the interim.
We are absolutely aware of that. We have been consistent in calling not only for the cessation of hostilities to continue in Syria, but also to push Russia to exert its influence on the Syrian regime to make that possible.
The mere fact that you're considering doing it is a shift.
Yeah, I would dispute that.
What?
I would say
How can you possibly dispute that? It has been the position of the administration that you would not, or that you would deconflict. As soon as the Russians sent their their planes and
Yep.
people in back in last September. The position up until now has been nothing other than just this deconfliction exercise. Now you are considering, have proposed, or willing to consider Russian proposal, but that is in itself is a shift. It is not consistent
Our
with your
focus-
position. All right, you're obviously, not going to get into it. And that is that your colleague at the White House and you also said that it's time that Russians have to make a choice. That they have to, this is a test. The testing has been going on and on and on and on and on. It seems clear to everybody, that, except for you guys apparently, or at least it seems clear to most people, that the Russians have made their choice. And
We've-
that it is kind of pointless to keep testing them when it's clear that they're not going to budge.
But we've seen repeatedly through the nature of this conflict that Russia does have influence. We saw when the beginning of the cessation of hostilities that they do have the ability to influence the regime. That is our goal here. Our points, our position have been the same all along on this now.
Just to be clear, has the secretary's, is this proposal coming from the secretary or is it an interagency proposal?
So again, I'm not going to comment on specifics of any proposal.
So would you say that the secretary's trip is the full backing of the White House and of
I would-
President Obama?
I'm not going to characterize that for the White House, but I would say that the secretary is going to present and to have discussions in Moscow that present the administration's views. I am not going to get ahead of those discussions right now.
Because, I mean, as usually when a Secretary of State goes with a proposal like this, it has the backing of the White House. But the White House has not specifically said that.
Well,
And that's
because
what puts
I
it to
think
doubt.
the awkward thing is none of us are talking about any proposal right now. What we're talking about is there's going to be discussions that happen. They start tonight when the secretary meets with President Putin. They'll continue tomorrow as he meets with Foreign Minister Lavrov. Let's see where they go.
Because, I mean, as usually when a Secretary of State goes with a proposal like this, it has the backing of the White House. But the White House has not specifically said that.
Well,
And that's
because
what puts
I
it to
think
doubt.
the awkward thing is none of us are talking about.
I do not have any announcements to make at the top, so we can go straight to whatever questions may be on your mind today.
There are reports about the U.S. offering Russia some sort of military deal to go after the Islamic State group and Al-Qaeda in Syria. Is that something you can comment on, or is something like that in the works?
At present, the United States is not conducting or coordinating military operations with Russia. I know there's some speculation that an agreement may be reached to do so, but it's not clear that that will happen. Since that time, we have seen the security situation and stability erode, and that has dealt a setback to efforts to reach a political agreement. As it relates to our military coordination, we've always made clear that we would welcome a contribution, a military contribution from Russia, as long as they were focused on ISIL and Al-Qaeda's presence in Syria. Unfortunately, we've seen them devote too much of their attention to using their military might to prop up the Assad regime. So the situation that we find ourselves in now is Russia's at a crossroads. Russia has to decide for themselves if they're prepared to take the kinds of actions that we've been hoping they would take for quite some time now. And the consequences for Russia are quite grave.